The sun was hot and mean on that day in August when Sarah Mitchell stepped off the train at Copper Ridge Station. Her old leather boots kicked up dust with every step. She was a thin woman, made strong by work and sadness. Her face was weathered like old wood, and her eyes were the color of the desert sky. At 43 years old, Sarah looked like she had already lived 10 lives. But today she felt alive in a way she had not felt since her husband died 3 years ago. She stood on the wooden platform and looked at the 3 large wooden crates that sat in the dusty corner of the station. Inside those crates were 3 baby horses, foals, they called them. The crates were marked with strange names and numbers from faraway Texas. These foals were the most important thing Sarah Mitchell owned in this world. She had spent every dollar she had saved for 5 years to buy them. She had sold her late husband's golden watch. She had sold her good dishes and her grandmother's china set that she had planned to pass to children she would never have. "Those your horses?" asked the station master. He was an old man named Tom with a belly that hung over his belt. "Yes," Sarah said. "They are mine. I bought them fair and square from a dealer in Texas." Tom shook his head slowly. He looked at the crates like they might explode. "Well, good luck to you, Miss Sarah. You're going to need it." Sarah did not like the sound of his words. She did not like the way he said them with a kind of pity mixed with doubt. But she did not ask him what he meant. She already knew what people in the small town of Dry Creek thought about her. They thought she was crazy. They thought a woman alone could not run a big ranch. They thought a woman should sell her land and move to the city to live with relatives. The other ranchers had laughed when they heard her plan. Big Tom Harrison, who owned the largest ranch in the area, had come by her house one week before the foals arrived. He had sat on her porch and drunk her coffee and told her she was making a big mistake. "Sarah," he had said with a false smile, "why you want to waste your money on wild horses? You know nothing about training animals. Why don't you sell me your ranch? I will give you a good price. You could be happy living somewhere nice and safe." Sarah had smiled back at him, but she said nothing. She knew what Tom Harrison wanted. He wanted her land. Her ranch had good water from a clean stream. It had rich soil where grass grew tall. Many people wanted her land, but she would never sell it. Her husband had built that ranch for nothing. Every tree he planted was a memory. Every fence he made was a promise that they would have a good life together. But her husband was dead now, and without good horses, she could not keep the ranch going. This was why she had made the bold plan. This was why she had spent all her money. Sarah walked over to the wooden crates and touched them gently. She could hear sound from inside. Small sounds. Baby sounds. The sounds of young animals afraid and confused. Her heart felt full and scared at the same time. "I need help," she said to Tom. "I need to get these crates on my wagon." Tom and 2 other men helped Sarah load the 3 crates onto her old wooden wagon. It was hard work, even for strong men. The crates were heavy and the foals inside moved around, making the crates shift and jump. It took almost 1 hour to get everything loaded safely. Sarah paid the men with coins she had been saving for food. As Sarah prepared to leave, a man on a black horse rode up to the station. He was tall and strong with a face like stone. Everyone knew who he was. His name was Black Jack Morgan. He was the most famous horse trainer in the whole territory. He trained horses for rich people from back east. He had trained horses for the army and for famous outlaws too. He knew more about horses than anyone alive. Black Jack Morgan stopped his horse and looked at Sarah's wagon. He looked at the 3 crates. He looked at Sarah's face. "I heard you bought some wild mustangs," he said. His voice was deep and quiet. "Yes, sir," Sarah said. "I did. They're supposed to be gentle." Black Jack Morgan laughed. It was not a mean laugh, but it was not kind either. It was the laugh of a man who had seen many foolish things. "Who told you that?" he asked. "Who said those animals were gentle?" "A dealer," Sarah said. "A man from Texas. He had a paper that said they were gentle and already trained." Black Jack Morgan rode his horse a little closer. He looked into Sarah's eyes. "Miss, I will tell you something true. There is no such thing as a wild mustang that is gentle. Those animals out there in the desert are free. They run where they want. They do what they want. You cannot make them gentle by writing it on a paper. And any man who sells wild horses and says they are gentle is a liar." Sarah felt something drop in her stomach, but she did not let it show on her face. "What should I do?" she asked. "Sell them. Black Jack Morgan said, "Sell them to the butchers. That is the only smart thing to do. Or, better yet, let them go free back to the desert where they belong. Those animals will hurt you, Miss Sarah. Those animals will kick you and bite you and throw you from their backs. I have seen it happen to men stronger than you. I have seen it happen to men who knew horses better than you." He turned his horse around to leave, then stopped and looked back. "If you are crazy enough to try anyway," he said, "do not say I did not warn you." Then he rode away in a cloud of dust. Sarah stood there for a long time. Her hand was shaking a little. The sun was starting to go down, and the sky was turning red and orange. She could hear the foals crying inside the wooden crates. But Sarah Mitchell did not sell them. She did not let them go free. She loaded herself into her wagon, took the reins in her hands, and drove her team of horses back toward her ranch at Dry Creek. She had spent everything she owned. She had made a choice. Now she would have to live with it or die trying. The sun was just coming up over the hills when Sarah Mitchell drove her wagon into the yard of her ranch at Dry Creek. Her horses were tired from the long journey from the station. The wagon wheels had made deep tracks in the dry dust. Everything was quiet except for the sounds of the three foals moving inside their wooden crates. They made small crying sounds, like babies who were lost and scared. Sarah tied her horses to the big post near the barn. Her hands were shaking a little as she looked at the three crates sitting in the back of her wagon. For the last 2 hours of the drive, she had thought about the words that Black Jack Morgan had said to her. She had thought about his warning. She had thought about what would happen if he was right, and she was wrong. But she had come too far to turn back now. "Come on, Sarah," she said to herself out loud. "You can do this. You bought them. Now you have to take care of them." She went to the back of the wagon and opened the first crate very slowly. She was careful and gentle. She did not want to scare the foals more than they already were. The moment the wooden door came open, something exploded out of that crate like a bullet shot from a gun. It was the chestnut foal, a small horse with a brown coat and a white mark on its face like a lightning bolt. But this foal was not gentle. This foal was wild and crazy with fear. It jumped out of the crate and immediately reared up on its back legs, kicking the air with its front hooves. Its eyes were big and white with fear. It was screaming a sound that Sarah had never heard before, a long, loud neigh that sounded like pain and anger mixed together. Sarah fell backward and hit the ground hard. The air came out of her lungs. She lay there in the dust, stunned and scared. The chestnut foal ran around the yard like it had lost its mind. It kicked at the fence. It kicked at the barn door. It knocked over a wooden bucket that Sarah used for water. The little horse was small, maybe only 3 feet tall, but it fought like it was trying to kill everything around it. Sarah got up slowly and stayed against the barn wall. She did not want to get in the way of the crazy foal. Then she opened the second crate. The black foal came out more slowly than the first one. This foal did not jump and kick. Instead, it looked around with wide, frightened eyes. It saw the chestnut foal running wild. It became scared too. The black foal pressed itself into the corner of the yard, as far away from everything as it could get. It stood there shaking, making small, sad sounds deep in its throat. Sarah took a deep breath. She moved toward the third crate. The moment she opened it, the gray foal inside made the loudest sound of all. It was a high scream that seemed to come from the deepest part of its body. The gray foal was the biggest of the 3, maybe stronger than the others. It thrashed inside the crate, hitting the wooden sides over and over again. For a moment, Sarah thought the crate would break into pieces. Finally, the gray foal jumped out and began to run. It ran so hard and so fast that its tiny hooves barely touched the ground. It raced around the yard like it was running for its life. The other foals watched it with fear in their eyes. The chestnut kept kicking. The black kept shaking in the corner. The gray just ran and ran. Sarah sank down on a wooden bench near her house. She felt tears starting to come, but she pushed them back. She did not have time for tears. She had to think. She had to figure out what to do. For hours, she watched the foals. She did not try to touch them. She did not try to catch them. She just watched. By the middle of the day, all 3 foals were tired from running and screaming. They stood in different parts of the yard, breathing hard, watching Sarah with deep fear in their eyes. Every time she moved, even a little bit, they would jump and run away. Sarah made a decision. She would let them have the big field behind the barn. She opened the gate and watched as all three foals ran through it into the open space. They ran until they disappeared over a small hill. At least they would be safe there and have room to move. For the next week, Sarah worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She left food for the foals every morning. Fresh hay, fresh water, good grain to help them grow strong. She would wake up before the sun came up and walk out to the field to leave the food in safe places where the foals could reach it. Then she would back away and give them space. Some days the foals would eat the food. Some days they would not. Sarah did not know if they would live or die. The other ranchers began to hear stories about what happened at Sarah's ranch. Big Tom Harrison rode by one afternoon and stopped at her fence. He looked at Sarah like she was crazy. "I heard you got 3 wild foals," he said with a cruel smile. "I heard they're mean as snakes. I heard they tried to kill you." "They're just scared," Sarah said. She was muddy from working in the field all day. "They are young and scared and far from home. Once they learn to trust me, they will be better." Tom laughed. It was a mean laugh that made Sarah's skin feel cold. "You are going to die trying to train those animals," he said, "and then I will buy your ranch from your family at a fair price. Good luck, Sarah. You're going to need it." He rode away, leaving tracks in the dust. Every night, Sarah sat on her porch and looked out at the dark field where the 3 foals were. She could hear them sometimes, calling out to each other in the darkness. She wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. She wondered if Black Jack Morgan had been right about everything. But every morning, she woke up and did it all again. She left food. She walked carefully near them without trying to touch them. She talked to them in a soft, quiet voice. "I know you were scared," she would say. "I know the world seems big and bad and dangerous. But I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe here. You're going to be okay. I promise." The foals could not understand her words. But something in her voice was different from the rough, mean men who had captured them in the desert. Something in Sarah's voice was calm and steady and safe. And slowly, very slowly, that made a difference. 6 weeks had passed since Sarah opened those wooden crates in her yard. 6 weeks of hard work. 6 weeks of patience. 6 weeks of slow, small changes. The foals still jumped away when Sarah came too close. They still ran from her when she moved too fast. But something important had changed. They no longer screamed every time they saw her. The black foal would now eat from a bucket, while Sarah stood only 10 feet away. The chestnut foal had let her come close enough to touch the fence while it was eating. The gray foal still kept its distance, but it watched Sarah with less fear and more curiosity. It was progress. It was slow, but it was real. Sarah had learned to read the foals. She knew which one was brave and which one was timid. The chestnut was always first to try new things. The black was the follower, the one who watched the chestnut and then did the same thing. The gray was the thinker, the one who looked at everything carefully before deciding. Every morning and every evening, Sarah went to the field. She brought the foals fresh hay and fresh water. She brought good grain and sweet apples cut into pieces. She talked to them in the same soft voice. She never made quick movements. She never tried to force them. She just was there, steady and calm, day after day. "You are getting braver," she would tell the chestnut. "You are a brave little one." "Yes, you are." And the foals seemed to understand. Not the words, but the meaning behind the words. The kindness, the patience, the love. Then came the afternoon when the sky turned dark. Sarah was sitting on her porch, mending a torn saddle blanket, when she noticed the color of the sky. It was not just dark gray. It was dark green. It was the kind of green that meant danger. The wind had started to blow hard, picking up dust and making it dance across the yard. Sarah looked out at the field where the 3 foals were. They were already nervous. She could see them moving around, looking at the sky. They could feel something was coming. Animals always knew before people did. The wind got stronger. It knocked over a bucket near the barn. It made the trees bend like they were bowing. Sarah could smell rain coming from far away. She could smell the electricity in the air that meant lightning was coming. Then the first drops of rain began to fall. Within minutes, the rain was not falling. It was attacking. It came down so hard that Sarah could not see the barn from her porch. The wind screamed around the corners of her house like a live thing that was angry and wild. Thunder made the ground shake. Lightning split the sky into pieces, bright and white and terrible. Sarah stood up. She looked out at her field. She could barely see the three foals through the rain. They were huddled together near the fence, as close to shelter as they could get. They were terrified. She could see their bodies shaking even from far away. Most people would have stayed in their house. Most people would have waited for the storm to pass. Most people would have told themselves the foals would be fine, that horses could survive storms, that there was nothing they could do. But Sarah Mitchell was not like most people. She made a decision that most people would call crazy. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. She pulled her hat down tight on her head, and she walked out into the storm. The rain hit her face like hard stones. The wind tried to push her backward. She could barely see 2 feet in front of her face. Lightning lit up the whole world, and thunder came so close that it sounded like the sky was breaking apart. It took her a long time to reach the field. Her clothes were soaked. Her boots were full of mud. Her hands were shaking from cold and fear. But she kept walking. When she got to the foals, they were even more scared. They reared up and tried to back away from her. But there was nowhere to go. They were pressed against the fence, trapped by fear and the storm. Sarah did something very brave. She sat down in the mud. She sat down right there in the pouring rain and the wind and the lightning. She pulled the blanket around herself and the fence post. She did not try to touch the foals. She did not try to catch them. She just sat there. "It is okay," she said, though the wind took away most of her words. "It is okay. I am here. You are not alone. It is going to be okay." The foals watched her. Their eyes were wide and wild with fear. The lightning flashed. The thunder came. The rain poured down like an ocean was falling from the sky. And then something beautiful happened. The chestnut foal, the brave one, took a small step towards Sarah. Then another step. Its tiny hooves made soft sounds in the mud. It walked over to Sarah and pressed itself against her body. Sarah did not move. She just sat there, holding still, feeling the terrified little horse shaking against her. The black foal watched what the chestnut was doing. After a few minutes, it also walked over to Sarah. It too pressed against her body, seeking warmth and safety. The gray foal was last. It took longer for it to decide. But finally, it also came over and stood close to Sarah. By midnight, all 3 foals were huddled against Sarah in the middle of the storm. She wrapped her blanket around them as best she could. Her body was wet and cold, but the foals were warm. Their fear was slowly starting to disappear because they felt her calmness. They felt her love. They felt her strength. The storm raged all night. But inside the circle of the blanket and Sarah's arms, there was peace. There was safety. There was trust. When the sun came up the next morning, the storm was gone. The sky was blue again. The wind had stopped. Everything was clean and wet and new. Sarah was still sitting in the same spot. The 3 foals were still pressed against her body, sleeping now, their fear finally gone. Her legs hurt. Her arms hurt. She was so cold and wet that she could barely move. But when Sarah looked at the 3 foals sleeping safely against her, she smiled. This was the moment. This was when everything changed. The foals did not just know Sarah would not hurt them. They knew Sarah would protect them. They knew Sarah would sit in a terrible storm with them. They knew Sarah loved them. And that love, that trust, would change both of them forever. Sarah sat there in the morning sun, exhausted and happy, with 3 sleeping foals against her chest. She had crossed from being a stranger to being their mother. She had earned their trust in the hardest way possible. And now anything was possible. 2 months had passed since the night of the storm. The 3 foals had grown bigger and stronger. Their bodies were sleek and healthy now. Their coats were shiny and bright. More importantly, they loved Sarah with a love that was deep and true. The chestnut foal would come running whenever Sarah called its name. She named it Lightning because it was so fast and brave. The black foal was quieter, but just as loving. She named it Shadow because it always followed her everywhere, like a shadow that did not want to be separated from her. The gray foal was strong and thoughtful. She named it Storm because it had come to her during the storm and had learned to trust her there. Every day, Sarah worked with the 3 foals. She taught them to walk with her on a rope. She taught them to accept the saddle blanket on their backs without jumping and running. She taught them to let her touch their faces and their ears and their hooves. She was doing this all by herself, without help, using only her patience and her love. But Sarah knew she needed more knowledge. She needed to learn the proper way to train horses. She knew there were things she did not understand about saddles and bridles and how to teach horses to accept these things. One morning, Sarah was working with Lightning in the yard. She was trying to teach the foal to hold still while she worked with a blanket. That was when she heard a horse coming down the road. It was Black Jack Morgan. He was riding his black horse slowly, moving easy in the saddle like a man who had nothing but time. When he saw Sarah with the 3 foals, he stopped his horse. He sat there for a long moment, just watching. Sarah felt her heart beat fast. She remembered what Black Jack Morgan had said to her that day at the train station. She remembered his warning. She remembered him saying she would get hurt or killed trying to train wild horses. "Hello," she said. Her voice was not scared, but it was not confident either. Black Jack Morgan got off his horse slowly. He walked over to the 3 foals without making any sudden movements. Lightning saw him coming and started to back away. But then Sarah touched Lightning's neck gently. "It is okay," Sarah said. "This man is a friend. He is going to help us." Black Jack Morgan stood quietly next to the foals. He looked at their bodies. He looked at their eyes. He looked at the way they responded to Sarah. He did not speak for a very long time. Finally, he said, "I have never seen anything like this in my whole life." Sarah did not know if that was good or bad. "These foals were wild," Black Jack Morgan said. "They were truly wild. I can see it in their eyes. I can see it in the way they move. But they love you. They trust you completely." He looked at Sarah with new respect in his eyes. "How did you do this?" he asked. "How did you turn wild mustangs into animals that love you?" "I just love them," Sarah said simply. "I just stayed patient and kind and let them learn that I would not hurt them." Black Jack Morgan nodded slowly. "You did something that most people cannot do," he said. "Most people try to force animals to obey them. Most people use hard hands and mean voices. You did the opposite. You used gentleness." He walked around the 3 foals, looking at each one carefully. "These animals are ready for training now," he said. "They have learned to trust you. That is the first and most important step. Now they need to learn to accept saddles and bridles and all the things that horses must accept if they're going to work." Sarah felt hope bloom in her chest. "Will you help me?" she asked. "I do not know how to do this properly." Black Jack Morgan smiled. It was a real smile, not like the one he had given her before. "I came here to help," he said. "I've been thinking about what you were doing. I've been thinking about those foals. And I realized something. I realized you might actually know more about horses than most men I know. Because you understand something important. You understand how to listen to them." For the next 2 weeks, Black Jack Morgan came to Sarah's ranch every day. He taught her things about horses that she had never known before. He taught her how to make a saddle fit properly, so it would not hurt the foal's back. He taught her how to introduce a bridle slowly, so the foal would not be scared. He taught her the right way to mount a horse, so the foal would feel safe. Most importantly, he taught her how to keep the love and trust alive, even while teaching the foals new things. "See," he told her one day while she was working with Lightning, "you can teach a horse to obey through fear, but that horse will never be truly good. That horse will always be looking for a way to hurt you or escape. But if you teach through love and trust, like you are doing, that horse will give you everything it has." The foals learned fast. They learned because they trusted Sarah. They learned because each new thing Sarah taught them was done with gentle hands and a calm voice. Within 2 weeks, Lightning could wear a saddle without jumping. Shadow could wear a bridle without fear. Storm could accept Sarah touching every part of its body. Word began to spread through the town of Dry Creek. People started to come by Sarah's ranch just to see what was happening. They would stand at her fence and watch in amazement as the 3 wild foals walked calmly with Sarah. They watched as she taught them to move in circles. They watched as she began to ride Lightning around the yard, and the foal responded perfectly to her guidance. One day, Big Tom Harrison rode up to the fence. He sat on his horse and watched for a long time. His face was not smiling anymore. His face was serious. "I was wrong about you," he said finally. "I thought you were crazy. I thought you would fail. Sarah did not say anything mean back to him. She just nodded. "Those are the finest horses I have ever seen," Tom said. "And they love you. I can see it in the way they look at you. I have never seen a horse love a person like that." He turned his horse to leave, then stopped. "I'm going to tell people in town about what you have done," he said. "I'm going to tell them you're the best horse trainer in this whole territory. Because you are. And I'm sorry I did not believe in you." Then he rode away. Blackjack Morgan stayed for 2 more weeks after that. By the time he left, the 3 foals could do many things. They could walk, trot, and run with Sarah riding on their backs. They could stop when Sarah wanted them to stop. They could turn left or right with just a gentle pull of the reins. But more than that, they were happy. They were free spirits that had learned to work with a human they loved. On the day Blackjack Morgan was leaving, he stood with Sarah and looked at the 3 foals grazing in the field. "You have a gift," he told her. "You have a gift for understanding these animals. Do not waste it. Keep training horses. Keep helping people learn the right way to work with animals. You could be famous someday." Sarah smiled. She did not care about being famous. She only cared about lightning, shadow, and storm. She only cared about the fact that these 3 wild foals had become her best friends. She only cared that she had proven something to herself and to the whole town. She could do the impossible. 1 year had passed since Sarah Mitchell first opened those wooden crates at the train station. 1 year of hard work. 1 year of patience. 1 year of love and dedication that had changed everything. It was a bright morning in late summer when Sarah rode into town on the back of Storm, the gray foal that had learned to trust her during the terrible storm. Lightning and Shadow trotted beside her, moving as one smooth unit with the rhythm of her heartbeat. The 3 horses were no longer small foals. They had grown tall and strong. Their coats shined like polished silver in the morning sun. They moved together like dancers who had practiced their steps 1,000 times. Sarah sat tall in the saddle. She wore her best dress, the one she had worn to her wedding so many years ago. Her face was still weathered and brown from working outside in the sun, but her eyes were bright with pride and happiness. This was her moment. This was the day she had dreamed about during all those hard weeks of work. The people of Dry Creek had heard that she was coming. Word had spread through the town like fire. By the time Sarah reached the main street, people were standing on the sidewalks and on the porches of the buildings. They had come to see the woman who had done the impossible. Children ran alongside her horses, laughing and pointing. The horses did not jump or kick. They simply walked with calm confidence, responding to Sarah's gentle guidance. Every step they took was perfect. Every movement showed how well Sarah had trained them. Sarah rode slowly down the main street. She looked at the faces of the people who had doubted her. She saw Big Tom Harrison standing outside his store. He took off his hat and held it over his heart as she passed. He nodded with respect. His face showed that he understood he had been wrong about her. The station master, Old Tom, stood on the platform where Sarah had picked up the crates 1 year ago. His mouth was open in amazement. He pointed at the 3 horses and spoke to the people standing near him. But Sarah could not hear his words. She did not need to hear them. She could see the change in his face. She could see that he now understood that Sarah had not been crazy. She had been brave. At the end of the main street stood the building of the Dry Creek Saloon. Blackjack Morgan was standing on the porch, watching Sarah come toward him. When she reached him, he stepped forward and took Storm's bridle gently in his hand. He looked up at Sarah with a huge smile on his face. "You did it," he said. His voice was filled with pride. "You actually did it." "We did it," Sarah said, and she reached down to touch his shoulder. "I could not have done this without you." Blackjack Morgan shook his head. "No," he said. "I only taught you the mechanics. The real work was already done. You did this with your heart, Sarah. You did this with patience and love and belief in these animals when nobody else believed." He stepped back and looked at the 3 horses. He walked around them slowly, checking their legs and their bodies and their eyes. "These are the finest horses in this territory," he said finally. "And more than that, they are happy. You can see it in their eyes. They love what they do because they love you." Sarah felt tears come to her eyes, but she blinked them back. This was not a time for tears. This was a time for celebration. Over the next few hours, people came to Sarah and wanted to touch the horses and talk to her. The mayor of the town invited her to the town hall meeting. The newspaper man from the county seat arrived with a camera to take pictures of Sarah and the three horses. People wanted to buy the horses from her. They offered her large amounts of money. But Sarah said no to everyone who wanted to buy Lightning, Shadow, and Storm. These horses were not for sale. They were her family. They were her teachers. They were the proof of something important that she had learned. By evening, Sarah was tired but happy. She rode out of town slowly, heading back toward her ranch at Dry Creek. As the sun began to go down, painting the sky in colors of red and gold and purple, Sarah thought about everything that had happened in 1 year. She thought about the desperation she had felt when she first bought those foals. She thought about the night when Black Jack Morgan had warned her. She thought about the terrible storm when she had sat in the rain and mud and earned the trust of 3 wild animals. She thought about all the days of work and patience and love. And now here she was. Her ranch was no longer dying. It was strong and growing. She had started training other wild horses for people who wanted to learn her methods. She had become known throughout the whole territory as the best horse trainer, the one who could transform wild animals through kindness instead of cruelty. But more than that, she had transformed herself. She was no longer a desperate widow who was losing everything. She was a strong, independent woman who had proven that she could do anything she set her mind to. She was a woman who had learned that patience and love were more powerful than force and fear. When Sarah reached her ranch, she rode the 3 horses into the barn. She removed their saddles slowly and carefully, talking to each one as she worked. "Thank you," she whispered to Lightning. "Thank you for being brave." She touched Shadow's soft black nose. "Thank you for being loyal and true." She pressed her forehead against Storm's gray face. "Thank you for teaching me that trust is the greatest gift of all." That night, Sarah stood on her porch and looked out at her ranch. In the distance, she could see Lightning, Shadow, and Storm grazing in the field, their bodies dark shapes against the golden light of the setting sun. Behind them were the other wild horses she had begun to train, horses that would soon become gentle and strong and ready to work. Sarah thought about the words that Black Jack Morgan had said to her. He had told her she could become famous someday. But Sarah did not care about being famous. She cared about knowing that she had done something that mattered. She cared about knowing that she had proven something to herself and to the whole world. She had proven that one person could make a difference. She had proven that patience could overcome fear. She had proven that love was stronger than doubt. The 3 wild foals she had bought online for a desperate dream had become 3 perfect horses. And in saving them, she had saved herself. As Sarah watched the sun disappear behind the hills, she smiled. She thought about tomorrow and all the days that would come after. She thought about the horses she would train and the people she would help and the impossible things she would do. Sarah Mitchell had found her purpose. She had found her strength. She had found her place in the world. And it had all started with 3 tiny foals that nobody else wanted.